For decades, France held a position of unquestioned influence in Africa. This dominance stemmed from its colonial past and the intricate web of political, economic, and military ties woven in the post-colonial era. However, the sands are shifting. A new era is dawning, one where France's grip on the continent is steadily weakening. From the bustling streets of Dakar to the dusty plains of Ouagadougou, a potent mix of resentment and ambition is driving African nations to redefine their relationships with the world. The old order is crumbling, making way for new partnerships and alliances. The signs of this transformation are impossible to ignore. Military coups, once a rarity, have become a recurring theme, often accompanied by the unceremonious expulsion of French troops. Anti-French sentiment, simmering beneath the surface for decades, has erupted into full-blown protests, fueled by accusations of neocolonialism and economic exploitation. This wave of change is not merely a blip on the radar. It signifies a profound shift in the geopolitical landscape of Africa. This essay delves into the multifaceted factors contributing to France's waning influence in Africa. We will explore the historical context of colonialism and Françafrique, examining how the ghosts of the past continue to haunt the present. We will dissect the reasons behind the burgeoning anti-French sentiment, looking at the economic disparities, political interference, and perceived security failures that have fueled resentment. Furthermore, we will analyze the role of emerging global players like Russia and China, who are eagerly stepping into the void left by France's retreat. Ultimately, this essay seeks to answer a crucial question: what does the future hold for Franco-African relations? Can France adapt to this new reality, or is its era of dominance in Africa drawing to a close? Understanding France's waning influence in Africa requires delving into the historical context of colonialism and the intricate system of Françafrique. From the late 19th century, France carved out a vast empire in Africa, subjugating populations and exploiting resources to fuel its own ambitions. While the formal end of colonial rule in the 1960s brought about political independence, it did little to dismantle the structures of control that France had so carefully constructed. This neocolonial system, known as Françafrique, allowed France to maintain its grip on its former colonies through a complex web of political, economic, and military mechanisms. At the heart of Françafrique lay the CFA franc, a currency pegged to the French franc and later the euro, effectively giving France control over the monetary policies of its former colonies. This financial leverage, coupled with preferential trade agreements and strategic investments, ensured that France continued to benefit from Africa's wealth long after the official end of colonialism. Françafrique also extended to the political sphere. France cultivated close ties with African elites, often propping up autocratic regimes that served its interests. This interference in domestic politics, often conducted through covert operations and backroom deals, bred resentment among the populace, who saw their country's destinies held hostage by foreign powers. The legacy of Françafrique continues to cast a long shadow over Franco-African relations, fueling anti-French sentiment and driving African nations to seek genuine partnerships based on mutual respect and shared benefits. In essence, Françafrique represented a continuation of colonial practices by other means. It ensured that while the flags of independence might have been raised, The levers of power, be they economic, political, or military, often remained in the hands of Paris. This system, shrouded in secrecy and built on exploitation, sowed the seeds of discontent that are now bearing fruit in the form of widespread anti-French sentiment and a rejection of the old order. Across the African continent, a wave of anti-French sentiment is surging, manifesting in street protests, political rhetoric, and a growing desire to break free from the perceived shackles of French neo-colonialism. This sentiment, simmering for decades, has reached a boiling point, fueled by a potent mix of historical grievances, economic disparities, and perceived French hypocrisy in its dealings with Africa. One of the primary drivers of anti-French sentiment is the perception that France continues to prioritize its own economic interests at the expense of its former colonies. The CFA franc, seen by many as a symbol of French economic control, has come under intense criticism for hindering the economic development of Francophone African nations. Critics argue that the CFA franc's fixed exchange rate with the euro, while providing stability, also makes exports less competitive and perpetuates a cycle of dependency. Beyond economics, resentment festers over France's continued military presence in Africa. While France frames its interventions, such as Operation Barkhane in the Sahel, as counterterrorism efforts, many Africans view them as a perpetuation of neo-colonialism. The perception that France is more interested in protecting its own strategic interests, such as securing access to uranium mines in Niger, than genuinely addressing the root causes of instability, further fuels anti-French sentiment. This growing wave of anti-French sentiment presents a significant challenge for France. It signals a fundamental shift in the dynamics of Franco-African relations, one where the old assumptions of French influence no longer hold true. To navigate this new reality, France must confront its colonial past, address the legitimate grievances of its former colonies, and embrace a more equitable and mutually beneficial approach to its engagement with Africa. Failure to do so risks further alienating its former allies and diminishing its influence on a continent undergoing rapid transformation. China's economic presence in Africa has grown significantly over the past few decades. From investments in infrastructure to trade partnerships, China's influence is evident across the continent. Many African nations have welcomed this influx of capital and expertise, seeing it as an opportunity for development and modernization. However, this relationship is also complex, with concerns about debt dependency and economic sovereignty. As we delve deeper, we'll explore the multifaceted nature of this burgeoning partnership and its implications for the future of Africa. The CFA franc, a remnant of colonial economic policy, continues to bind several African nations to France. This currency arrangement has been both praised for its stability and criticized for perpetuating economic dependence. French investments in Africa, particularly in sectors like energy, infrastructure, and telecommunications, remain substantial. These investments, while beneficial in some respects, often come with strings attached, influencing the political and economic landscape of the host countries. African nations are increasingly asserting their independence and seeking to diversify their international partnerships. This shift is driven by a desire to reduce dependency on former colonial powers and to harness the potential of emerging economies. Countries like China, India, and Turkey have become significant players in Africa, offering alternatives to traditional Western partnerships. This new reality requires both African nations and France to adapt their strategies and find new ways to collaborate. Despite the changing dynamics, France still maintains strong cultural and educational ties with many African countries. French language and culture continue to be influential through institutions like the Alliance Française and various cultural programs. Additionally, France leverages its soft power through development aid, military cooperation, and diplomatic initiatives. These efforts aim to foster goodwill and maintain a presence in a rapidly evolving geopolitical landscape. The future of Franco-African relations will likely be shaped by mutual respect and a recognition of Africa's growing agency on the world stage. Both sides will need to address historical grievances and build partnerships based on equality and shared interests. As Africa continues to rise, the nature of its relationship with France will evolve, potentially leading to a more balanced and mutually beneficial partnership.